rSlashMaliciousCompliance. You'll lose most of your money if you cancel your holiday with us. You'll lose most of your money if you cancel. I recently had a holiday booked to Mexico, which at the time of booking, early 2020, it came to around £2,200 for 2 people for 2 weeks. We felt pretty fortunate to have been able to get that at that sort of price. Anyway, COVID happened, and as you can imagine, the holiday we booked with TUI, British Holiday travel agent, was postponed. Feeling a little anxious to go abroad even when restrictions were lifted, my partner and I decided we wanted to cancel and rebook at another time. Truth be told, we could have also benefited quite a lot with having some of that money back. I called them to cancel after a rather lengthy hold to get through to them to be told, "Sorry, if you want to cancel, you will lose £2,100 of the £2,200 that you paid. However, you can make a free of charge amendment and you or we will pay the difference, so if your new holiday is cheaper, we will refund the difference." Okay, let me speak with my partner and see what we want to do. Malicious compliance begins. I have no interest in postponing my holidays, so I browse their other destinations on the website. I phone back the next day. Me. "Hi, I'd like to make an amendment to my booking, please." TUI. "Sure, no problem. Do you have a destination in mind?" Me. "Yes, I've found this rather appealing location in the Canary Islands, which also happens to be your cheapest holiday. Oh, and I want to amend it from 2 weeks to your minimum stay." TUI. "Okay, so you'll get a refund of £1,750 and your holiday has now been amended." After receiving my refund a few days later, I call them and tell them I wish to cancel my new crappy cheap holiday. At this point, I have lost about half of what the crappy cheap holiday would have cost. Instead of losing £2,100, I only ended up losing £280. Granted, it's still not ideal to have lost out on £280, but it is better than losing most of what I paid. TLDR. Wanted to cancel a holiday which would have meant I would lose most of what I paid. I took a different approach which saw me claw back most of what I paid for it. Edit. To those saying about chargeback, I didn't purchase the holiday on a credit card, I used a debit card. Chargeback wouldn't have worked as the money belonged to me, not the bank. Edit 2. For those saying this isn't MC, if their policies were designed to make things easier for the customer, they wouldn't have made the refund process so difficult. I would say this is MC, as I was using a loophole in their policies to ensure the best result for me. Edit 3. Well, tits, I didn't know you could do chargebacks on debit card. Thank you for educating my smooth brain. Actually sounds like that agent tried to help you out to the best of their ability. Crappy company though. As someone who has worked for a crappy company, I can tell you if an agent seems to repeating a certain phrase or statement, they either want you off the phone, or want you to ask a specific question that gives them greater authority. Especially with cable and phone companies, if you want a better price, say, "I am thinking of canceling my services to go with major competitors, offer." You'll usually get offered a shit deal. Say no, I've decided to cancel. They'll transfer you somewhere, you'll have to wait a while, but the next guy up the chain can offer you, usually, something similar to the competitor's offer. I used to work tech support for HP, and they charged $30 to send you a Windows CD if you neglected to burn one on your first boot. However, if you said you tried to burn it and it failed, they'd send you one for free. I told every single person who needed a Windows CD this, and only once did a guy say, "So you're saying if I call back and say I tried, but it failed, you won't charge me?" I didn't tell you to do that, but that's correct. Thanks buddy, click. I used to work front desk at a hotel. We had a deal advertised on a billboard that said if you mentioned our ad, you'd get $50 off a $125 room. Pretty good deal. So on slow afternoons, evenings, if you were nice to the front desk staff, we'd go, "Sue, you saw the billboard advertisement on Highway X while driving here, right? The billboard that said we'd give you $50 off." And if you were a jerk, we'd play dumb and refuse to offer any discounts unless you specifically named the phrase on the billboard. I'm dumb and lawful good enough that I don't know if I would say yes to that even if you were helping me out. It hurts my soul a bit. I've heard a similar situation before. Somebody wanted to cancel their booking, but it was too close to the date. It had to be over a couple months away to be free, so couldn't without losing a lot of pound. But changing the dates to other available dates was free. Change dates for free to a couple months away and then cancel. I've seen this a few times with doctor's appointments. My favorite was when they did it all in on phone call. Got told there was a cancellation fee, but they could reschedule instead. They rescheduled to a few weeks away, then immediately canceled at no cost. Weird, the COVID clause didn't affect it. Canceling because of a pandemic should be sufficient. All of the travel insurance I've looked into buying over the last 2 years only covered unforeseen circumstances, and they deemed COVID as something predictable, rendering the insurance useless. It's an annoying game to play when there's really no other way to protect the cost of your trip. I purchased a vacation to Italy last year which was cancelled due to COVID, and the travel agency was great and I got a full refund. However, I learned that travel insurance is a waste of money as I couldn't get back my insurance cost for a trip that was cancelled, and therefore they had nothing to insure. I was given a voucher for the value which I could use within the next year. AIG is a bunch of criminals. I used to be a travel consultant and I spent a long time in the industry, and I have to tell you that travel insurance is not a waste of money. Travel insurance is the single most important purchase of your entire trip. You should consider it just a part of the cost of travel, like plane tickets. Some travel insurance companies are a little shady, but there are a great many who are tip-top, such as Allianz. There are many examples of why everybody traveling, especially internationally, needs travel insurance, and I'm happy to go into it in greater detail if you'd like. But here's one example. If you get in trouble and you need a helicopter to life flight you out, the cost starts at $200,000. If it needs to be done internationally, and only goes up from there. Whatever your medical insurance doesn't cover, and if you're traveling internationally most medical insurance covers nothing, is on you personally to pay. That's a hefty chunk of change that can be avoided for just a couple $100 before you leave, and there are a lot of other benefits that come with travel insurance as well. I don't work in the industry anymore. I'm not making any commission by encouraging people to do this. I promise you this is the best decision for you and your family. Always get travel insurance. I've seen what happens if you don't. I used my travel insurance to cover broken phone screens, damaged GoPros, and female medical issues. I would have been thousands of dollars out of pocket if I didn't have travel insurance. I've also seen a girl who shattered her wrist snowboarding rack up $2,000 in bills just going to ski patrol and then being admitted to the local hospital, let alone the other hospital bills she was sent afterwards. She did not opt for ski coverage with her travel insurance, so was personally on the hook for every dollar. Never worked in the insurance industry, but a good insurance policy is definitely worth it. Geez, who goes snowboarding or skiing without winter sports coverage? I mean, if you're lying on a beach somewhere, I can see the reluctance to bet insurance, but if the purpose of your trip is to throw yourself down a frozen mountain strapped to something you can't stop, surely you'd consider it. Literally just ran into this. My workplace is out almost $800 because the training we planned to send some employees to was cancelled because of COVID, and Allianz says that their insurance doesn't cover COVID-related issues. Despite also saying that pandemic coverage has been added to their most popular plans, and listing it as a benefit on all their domestic coverage plans, while also conveniently failing to list the plan we had as one of the available plans. We were not given an option of plan as we got the coverage through Delta. Frick Allianz. We got married March 14th of last year, and in the weeks leading up to our wedding, honeymoon, our travel agent was pushing that we purchase the travel insurance as we were going to Jamaica and then France. I cared more about spending time together after the wedding than a big day, and wanted to do it big. When I asked on March 3rd of last year if it covered any COVID-related issues as things in France were slowly starting to close, the answer was no, even if one of us got sick. So what was the point of pushing the insurance other than making a few $100 more off of us? Thankfully the resorts, hotels, and airlines gave us credits, but it's so frustrating now trying to use them all without worrying if we'll actually be able to go, and if it's cancelled if we get the money back. We were able to go to Jamaica last September after rescheduling twice, but I spent the whole week leading up to it having constant panic attacks that we would get sick, stuck there, etc. But at that point it was basically go or lose out on the $2,500 plus flights. Would it cover an appendicitis, maybe ruptured and creating an abscess, not only requiring operation, but 2 weeks of hospital admission for IV antibiotics? Would the insurance cover the transfer back to your home country's hospital? Traveling without insurance is crazy. There are so many things that can happen. My wife just booked a flight, and the travel insurance specifically listed COVID as a covered thing. Print a copy before it mysteriously disappears. I'm sure some places are covering it now, but a lot aren't. And if the company is including it in the cost, it usually comes in the form of credits, which can be frustrating with the constant price fluctuations. The travel insurance I bought a few months ago said that if there's a government or medical quarantine, then it's covered. But since 80% of the COVID orders we get are strong suggestions and guidance, travel insurance wouldn't cover you if your vacation was going to a place that suddenly became a COVID hotspot. So I ended up paying a bit more for cancel for any reason insurance, which only insures up to 75% of the cost, and it costs approximately 10% of what it insures. Still worth it, but not a slam dunk. Unfortunately, their attitude was very much, hey, government says we can do this, so regardless of your concerns, this is how we're gonna do it. I had the opposite issue but with Expedia, and I was flying to the UK. They charged me extra and I just ate the $1,200 that I had spent on the previous one. Never doing that again. Might have been true last year when airlines were actually shut down, but in a more stable time the excuse probably doesn't hold as much meaning. This is why I always use a credit card to book holidays. Section 75 protection is so useful. I had a couple of airlines try to pull the small admin fee and refund everything except the deposit. Well, guess what? My credit card paid me back the lot. Credit card companies weren't giving refunds due to COVID. Mine didn't. In the UK we have Section 75, or the Consumer Credit Act, protection on credit cards. It makes credit card companies as responsible for the thing you zero or chase as the original retailer. It means if the company you bought whatever from can't or won't do what you paid them for and are unable or unwilling to refund you, your credit card has to. I personally aim to never book with TUI again. My holiday was within 14 days cancellation period, and then holidays needed to be cancelled, postponed due to flights being stopped and borders being shut. It took so long to get to the unfortunate timing as their main phone line for disability service and customer support was very slow and hampered the TUI store I visited even trying to ensure my safety, etc. So 14-day cancellation, ring the store and the lovely manager says sure we will do so, legally in the right after all. But then before they get chance no one's allowed in the offices, etc. UK. So here we go down the rabbit hole. TUI refused to pay. They only offered a new holiday or I would lose out on all my money. So yes, at the start they tried this tactic and I stood firm, and got pretty pissed. And then silence when I said I was within my cancellation period, both for the store and remote phonings. This radio silence was for phone calls, emails, even the company responsible for TUI. So I knew exactly what to do. I got the bank involved, big red bank that peeps will be familiar with, and Visa. I sent a huge envelope of proof, the contract, the printed emails of their BS, and I waited. Well, I got all of the money from my bank and was told that the bank would handle the dispute with TUI. It was over a year before TUI sent official paperwork that recognized my holiday had been cancelled and refund returned to the bank. I understand the difficulties of going to WFH, of COVID, of money flow. But damn, don't try to screw me out of my contract. This is also the way to deal with hotel reservations. For many, if you cancel within X days, you lose your money, but it's no charge to change the date of the reservation to a date outside the no refund window. Then, you can just cancel the new reservation and get your money back. I actually lucked out. I tried contacting an airline to cancel tickets for December last year, got an automated email basically saying, due to COVID, our offices are not attended, we will get back to you as soon as possible. As I had been canceling bookings, this didn't fly. Literally, contacted my bank, they agreed I was to get my refund, so they did through their bank. I was happy. Last week, the airline refunded my money again, so I was happier. Other cancellations, a local airline said that the flight was still going ahead, if I wasn't there, it would be treated as a no-show, and I'd get a partial refund, bank refunded fully. A hotel had a stupid policy, can't cancel within 250 days, WTF. So they agreed to rebook it for the next year, 400 plus days ahead, and I cancelled it then for a full refund. I'm surprised you didn't get a refund. We were booked on a cruise on TUI's cruise company, and they did refunds for all cruises which could not go ahead. The other thing you could have done was rebook the same holiday for the same time next year, or the year after, so as to save the £280 and keep the holiday. But that did probably get you the cash much faster, which is a pretty good upside, haha. I'm surprised too, we got all our money back with TUI very easily. Yes, we rebooked twice because of lockdowns but could have had refunds from TUI just fine each time. Actually just got back from a break in Crete with one of their TUI blue places that I thoroughly enjoyed and recommend to anyone. The hotel and all the local places we went out to took really strict COVID precautions too, so I have to say we felt very safe in that regard, and hopefully the locals, staff themselves kept safe too. Having said that, their rules for refunds are quite stringent, and I can easily imagine falling into the wrong side of them through no fault of their own. I booked a trip which I had to cancel because of COVID. The travel company wanted to give me a voucher and wouldn't budge when I asked for a refund. Went back and forth with them for a bit without success, and then went to NSW Fair Trading. Took a few weeks, but after they got involved, the travel company suddenly apologized for taking so long to reply to my enquiry, and offered a refund less 10% unrecoverable costs, which I took. Consumer protection is quite strong in Australia though. Total cost was about 1,500 Australian dollars, but it was more the principle of the thing that pissed me off. Pro tip. These government agencies have online forms you fill out to detail your complaint, and if you organize it properly, it's much easier for them to deal with the matter. The guy who rang me complimented me on my submission. I had a summary detailing the nature of my complaint and the remedy I was seeking, a timeline of the case and annotated attachments including receipts, emails, etc. Whenever my wife and I travel where we anticipate spending more than a few $100s, we always get traveler's insurance. We went to Ireland for our honeymoon and had a domestic connection via JetBlue on the way back. There was a bad storm that held up the aircraft Delta was using to go from Dublin to JFK, and after 2 hours, our time allotment for connection was looking dicey. We tried changing flights, but there was no availability, and switching to the next day had fees on JetBlue. After some frantic research, we found a flight via Aer Lingus direct to the big airport nearest us. We bought tickets, raced through security, then called Delta and JetBlue, and watched our departure get delayed. Delta refunded our tickets same day. JetBlue fed us some bullshit about cancellation fees of $150, and how what was left, $50, would only be refunded as credit. It took over an hour for JetBlue to feed us that line. So we just didn't show for the flight. Called insurance. They paid out the ticket prices from JetBlue. No fuss. Just had to submit the original ticket receipt and a receipt showing we paid for a different flight. When we didn't have a receipt, they accepted the boarding passes. Incredibly easy. Payout took like a week or so from claim submission. Highly recommend. Couldn't you just have amended the date for like 2023 or something? I could have, but that most likely would have meant paying out a lot more because we got a pretty sweet deal at the time. Due to COVID, I wasn't in a place where I could really spend more money on top of what I had already paid. But we did consider this. Ah, I see. Yay, in my day you could change the date without penalty. Shame they closed that loophole. This post is a perfect example of why you should pretty much always use credit cards for everything unless it's a circumstance where you literally can't use a credit, like gas stations and certain grocery stores. A charge back for shit like this feels great to do. I've had to do that with an airline before. Frick you, Air Canada. Since everyone is saying what you're saying, could you elaborate? If I, from a legal perspective, am obliged to pay because of the contract, then how does a credit card help me? Edit. To those saying about chargeback, I didn't purchase the holiday on a credit card, I used a debit card. Chargeback wouldn't have worked as the money belonged to me, not the bank. This edit doesn't make any sense. You can still do a chargeback on a debit card just as much as a credit card, it makes no difference. A chargeback is the same thing on a debit card as a credit card. However, I'm not sure you'd be granted a chargeback in these circumstances because it's you wanting to cancel rather the supplier not providing the goods or services. However, using a credit card would have given you the additional option of Section 75 protection, which can be more powerful and, unlike chargebacks, is a legal right. Please, anybody reading, if the transaction is over £100, put it on a credit card. If you pay the credit card off in full every month, it's no different and costs you nothing, except you now have Section 75 protection enshrined in law. Honestly, I'm amazed people are putting £2,000 transactions on a debit card. I'd be terrified. Don't do it, ever. Why take the risk? But if for some reason you're bonkers and not using a credit card for £100 plus transactions, don't think you can't investigate the possibility of a chargeback just because it's a debit card. Chargebacks are the same on both debit and credit. A trip around the world in 80 minutes. This story comes from when I worked in an inbound call center. I handled escalation calls. When someone called in regarding their service plan with complaints that cannot be handled with a regular agent's authority, or the caller demanded to speak with a supervisor or manager, the call got transferred into my team's call queue and one of us handled it. Little background. I was born and raised in the Southwest. When I was wee little child, I spoke with a very heavy stutter. It took several years and lots of patience on my mother's part to teach me how to speak normally. The outcome was that I had to enunciate all my words carefully and thus spoke without any hint of a local accent. Later during my middle school days, I got teased a lot for not having a proper accent. So, I decided to teach myself how to speak with top proper accent. I watched a lot of my dad's old black and white westerns to learn the lingo. Then I started talking like Scotty from the original Star Trek series. It was fun, so I started copying other accents from TV and movies. I had over a dozen, including German Sergeant Schultz, I Know Nothing, pirate and badly dubbed Chinese Kung Fu, lots of pauses, simple phrases, and every sentence ends in ha. One bad side effect came about though. Often when I'm around a person with a heavy accent, I subconsciously begin to mimic their accent. I don't realize I'm doing it until it is pointed out. Usually the other person thinks I'm making fun of them or something. To avoid getting punched in the face, I have to do some quick explaining, without the borrowed accent. So a call comes into my queue and I answer it as normal, kinda. I had been joking around with my supervisor while using an Indian accent, so when I answered the call I was still using the accent. The woman caller was immediately furious. She started screaming at the top of her lungs that she had specifically demanded to speak with someone who spoke English, not a. Well, let's just say her choice of words lay heavy on the racist side, and leave it at that. Realizing my error, I dropped the accent and tried to talk with the lady normally, but she would have none of it. She continued on a horrible racist diatribe about foreign call center workers, how there wasn't any proper American English speakers anymore, and cussing me up one side down the other. Now I've handled a lot of angry calls by small-minded people, but there is one hot button I will not tolerate. The caller started insulting my parents. You wish to talk with someone who speaks English, correct? I broke in, dropping back into the Indian accent at the same time. Yes, not a problem, I said. I will transfer you to someone who speaks English. But, I must warn you, do not disconnect from the call for any reason whatsoever. We are experiencing a rather large call volume at this time. You are currently at the top of the queue. But, if you disconnect and call back, you will be all the way back at the bottom of the call line. And you do not want that, correct? God, no. Very well. Please stay on the line and the next available English speaker will be with you shortly. Have a most pleasant day. Then I put her on hold. It should be noted that we were not supposed to put callers on hold, but I did so that she would 1. Think she was being transferred, and 2. Make her listen to the horrible hold music. Placing a caller on hold immediately sent up a red flag in the call monitoring software. Normally a supervisor would come storming over and demand answers. My supervisor, however, had his cubicle right next to mine and had been leaning over the top when I had initially fumbled the call. He had also patched his phone into my line and heard everything the caller had said. "What are you doing?" he asked, while smiling a wicked smile. Exactly what she demanded. She wants to talk with someone who speaks English, then that is exactly what she's going to get. I replied with my own shish-eating grin. After 5 minutes I took the call off hold, and answered with my best Russian accent in place. Then on hold again. 5 minutes later German accent. Then French. Then Swedish. Then Mario Brothers Italian. So on and so forth. For over an hour I kept transferring this racist B*****, each time answering the phone with both good, bad, and horrible accents speaking English. I thought for sure she would have caught on around the 30-minute mark when I spoke pirate. She didn't, so I continued. After about 1 hour and 20 minutes of sending this woman on a verbal tour of the world, the woman was sobbing so hard I could barely make out her distressed words. So I went in for the kill. I answered the phone with a thick southern drawl. She was so happy. She spent a good 10 minutes telling me what a horrible experience she has had just to finally talk with someone who spoke proper English. I asked her what I could do for her and she told me what her issue was. It was something so simple that one of the regular agents could have handled it in less than 2 minutes. Finishing up the call, the woman once more thanked me for speaking proper English. I dropped back into the Indian accent. "Not a problem at all, madam. It was a pleasure to handle your call. You know, It is funny. You sound just like a woman I spoke to an hour ago. Isn't life strange? With a satisfied smile, I hung up during the scream of choking rage. Never had a stutter, but I always loved doing accents. Yeah, I can relate about speaking to someone with an accent and picking it up without thinking. Never had a problem, though, as big, broad-shouldered as I am. I never had anyone on the phone complain, either. Did customer service for 6 years, because I'd slip into it too easily, almost like they never noticed it. I didn't dare try answering the phone with an Indian accent as we had so many customers from that part of the world. When I first started with the company, I had one Indian caller, transferring service. He was a hoot as he wound up being pretty good with accents himself. One of the craziest things, he said, that he ever saw was when he visited a small enclave of Indian expats in Scotland. You think you've fallen into the twilight zone when you see a 6-year-old girl dressed in a formal sari, with the red dot on her head open her mouth and out comes the thickest Scot brogue you've ever heard. I had the same experience at a historical site in Massachusetts. A Native American man dressed in basically a loincloth, carving a canoe by hand, started speaking with a very strong Boston accent. I knew a rather rotund Asian guy from Northeast Texas. The most apt description of him was that he looked like Buddha and talked like Bubba. I know a guy here as SE10 very similar. He is full-blooded Japanese, adopted as a baby by a US serviceman and his nurse wife. Lived his whole life here in the South. We both coached select girls fast-pitch softball. He would call players' parents to set up a meeting, usually at a tournament so that he could see them play. He literally hid in plain sight. No one expected that little skinny Asian dude with the waist-length ponytail to be the redneck that they talked to on the phone. I saw 3 sets of parents' jaws hit the floor when he introduced himself. Hilarious. Sounds like a Homeland Security agent that I used to meet with at a previous job. Full Chinese features, built like a linebacker, and then when he spoke, straight Gomer Pyle. While I lived in Scotland, we attended a church with an Indian priest ministering to an English, Scottish, Ghanaian, and American congregation. You'd hear the scripture read in a thick Scottish accent, then a hymn from the most properly Northern English accent possible, then an American lead a liturgy, then the Ghanaian folks would sing a song in their native language while doing liturgical dance. Listen to the Indian Scottish priest speak with 2 competing accents at the same time, then go to the front as a man in a kilt offered you the blood of Christ. If there was ever a church that authentically spoke in tongues that only the love of God could translate, it is St. Andrew's Episcopal Cathedral in Aberdeen. That is pure, observational comedy. I can just see you recounting that story on open mic night. This is what I love about Reddit. I mean, I'm something of a storyteller, myself. But when I see someone that crafts such a reply, it blows me away. Take my Silv matey. It's bizarre going to South Asian communities on Mosque Day in Lancashire. All these guys dressed to the nines in their finest mosque kit, with the broadest Lancashire twang you've ever heard. In the army we had a Samoan dude, typical Samoan big football player type. With the deepest North Dakotan accent. He was adopted as a baby. The funniest part is there are a pretty large proportion of Samoans in the army, easy way to get off the island. It was hilarious when he would meet other Samoans and to watch their faces as he started to talk. Yeah, it always throws people off. Besides doing customer support, I did stand up for a few years, and voice impressions and accents were part of my routine. I'd been doing that for years before I finally got up to the mic. So there I was, working in Oklahoma back in '76, and I get this foreman shaking his head at me saying he can't understand my Texas drawl. I'm from Eastern Ohio. The only accent that would affect my early speech patterns would have been from West Virginia. A long way from Texas. Man, I thought it is super rare that I do this, since I have never seen anybody around me do this, or known anybody who did this. I already did it as a child without even noticing. I remember as kid, maybe 6 years old, we were on vacation. And where I come from has a strong dialect. So when I told people this is where I come from, they did not believe me. I was kid from another part of the country and spoke their dialect perfectly. People believed this is where I grew up, and then moved down south recently. Then I met another kid who also came from where I grew up, and spoke deepest home dialect I less than 30 minutes. People suddenly needed an interpreter when they needed anything from me, and now they were really mad at me. You see, back then I had zero control over it. Once my brain decided on a dialect, it is stuck, and I have no power to change it. but again people believed they knew better than I did how my brain worked and demanded I switch back. I kinda get it, they heard me talk normal for a week, and that this was me getting back at them for not believing me I spoke that dialect. It actually took me going through therapy, for very different reasons, to get at least some control over how I speak. But I really need to concentrate hard and can only switch to what I want for short time periods. As soon as I lose concentration, my brain takes over and attaches itself to any dialect nearby. Especially embarrassing is when someone speaks broken English or German and my brain decides to answer them the same way. I feel so bad when I do it. I sound like a racist making fun of their poor language skills. How much can you control it? Can you stop on command? Or switch to anything that is not around you? Or decide which of the ones around you want to latch onto? Man, you have no idea how relieving it is to hear other people do this too, cause so often I explain this to people, and they flat out refuse to believe me. So for the most part, one, avoid talking about it, unless I have to, usually cause someone is mad at me for doing it. I've never tried to pick up accents at all, but I've spent my whole life living in Northern California, and have no real accent per se. But I'm a big hockey fan, and listen to a lot of hockey podcasts as well. And when the hockey season is going strong, and depending on how much I'm immersing myself in the news, people will start to ask if I'm from Canada, as the accent starts creeping into my speech. My first diagnosis of CHF, I woke up in Windsor, Ontario, Canada. I'd picked up the nurse's accent quickly, ending every sentence with a. Insert, there are dozens of us. Dozens. Clip. I just happened to be a natural mimic. Voices, animals, devices. Accents were easy because I grew up at a time when dialect comedy was still done. Think Sid Caesar or Mel Blanc. When the Beatles came around, it only took me a day or two to pick up a British accent. Irish and Scottish brogues were common on TV, so I picked them up. I'm not sure, but, unlike my brothers and every guy the first went to school with, my playing around with my voice was enough that it never cracked. I was doing a dead on LBJ at the age of 10. At 11, I had the nickname Elvis. You can imagine how I got that. With me, though, when I accidentally slip into a dialect or accent, I would segue into it smoothly, so I had my Ohio accent at the start of the conversation, and mid-paragraph I was already slipping into the accent. I could stop, but as long as nobody complained, why bother? My supervisors always complimented me on my great voice control. These days, though, age has tended to let my voice go gravelly. Funny, though, I never once had a person get mad when I echoed back their accent. When you're halfway through helping someone and they drop the "so where are you based?" question, alarms bells go off. They then refuse to believe you're based in the same country as them, so they ask about the weather or tram system or some other bullshit. I did ask someone that today, but it was a spam call to my cell phone. If they had been based in the same country I am in, then the company would have owed me money for violating telephone regulations. Technically, they owed me money for violating regulations even if they were calling from a different country, but there is no enforcement mechanism for foreign calls. Oh damn. If I ask, it's 'cause I'm fully aware they're probably in Aberdeen or Swansea and I'm hoping to generally make friendly noises at them. I've only been asking in the last year or so because most of the poor buggers doing it for Aussie companies are in the Philippines. I always feel they should stay home and safe from COVID instead of dealing with my shit. I ask that to make polite conversation and to gauge what time of day, night it is there to rationalize why it took forever for my call to be answered. I don't doubt that people do that in a racist manner, but some of us just like to make polite small talk and compliment where people are from and appreciate their English skills. Often when I'm around a person with a heavy accent, I subconsciously begin to mimic their accent. I don't realize I'm doing it until it is pointed out. Usually the other person thinks I'm making fun of them or something. This is a daily struggle for me. I grew up moving all over the Southeast, New England, California, etc. Since we moved so much when I was so young, I would pick up the local accent quickly. Then when we moved again, I would drop that one and pick up whatever the new accent and vocabulary were. Even as an adult, I subconsciously drop in and out of accents depending on my audience. Sometimes people don't notice. Sometimes they point it out as a joke. Others get angry and think I'm mocking them. The worst reaction I got was about 2 months ago while talking to a very nice woman that spoke with a heavy AAVE dialect and accent. Without realizing it, I dropped straight into the dialect because one of the places we had lived growing up was inner city a block away from Section 8 and the elementary school I attended was overwhelmingly African American. About 5 minutes into our conversation, the woman interrupts me in the middle of my sentence and starts questioning me about why I was speaking to her in AAVE, how I was making her feel mocked and degraded, how white people aren't allowed to code switch into AAVE just because you're talking to a black person, etc. I let her say her piece and explained what had happened, but she absolutely refused to believe me. It's a useful skill to have for communicating with different groups of people, but man is it a double-edged sword. So, the very nice woman is actually not very nice. Nice. You have made it to the end already. Thank you for watching. If you aren't already subscribed, please do so, as there will be more videos like this in the near future.